You're listening to By Design with Iria Sapphire and Santos Alberto. So today we have a question from a 6-2 Sacral Manifesting Generator, and she asks, are there any challenges or activations I should be aware of in my chart with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction concerning business relationships, diet, personal relationships? If I could pinpoint areas, I would say root, sacral, throat, ajna challenges, and activations. Now, this is a great question. Part of why we're turning it into a full episode is because this has to do a lot with astrology and astrological predictions, and how do you navigate that from a human design perspective. So we're going to share with you specifically the answer to this question for this chart, and also give you a greater context of what it means for planets to be conjunct, how to look at the transits, and how to really navigate them in alignment with your human design. Santos, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, the only thing I would add to this is that right now, this is about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, but there are other conjunctions, and this also will give some insight to other astrological events like retrogrades or other kind of things that are happening in astrology that you might wonder, like, what does that really mean? And there's so many different kind of perspectives, even in the astrology community itself. I remember the last time there was a Mercury in retrograde, I asked, like, hey, what does it mean for Mercury to be in retrograde? And I got like a dozen different perspectives on it. And
it's a very specific perspective based upon human design.
In human design, it's a very specific kind of thing that we can point at and say, this is what's happening. And then sure, the interpretation can vary, but we'll show you exactly how to look this up, in Maya Mechanics, how to pull a chart and like look at it as it shows in the definitive guide to human design. And then the interpretation, we'll tell you when we're making it our interpretation, etc. But we'll show you how to actually like look up the information for yourself from a human design perspective. And I think that's what's really unique about human design, that you don't have to take it from us. We'll show you how we found the meaning of conjunction, and you can do the same for some other astrological events as well.
Yeah, so just to recap that in a nutshell, it really is about how do you navigate all the astrological transits and weather, really, like things that come up in astrology. How do you navigate that in alignment with your design? As a manjan, as a generator, how do you ensure that you stay rooted in satisfaction? As a projector, how do you ensure that no matter what's going on with the planets, with the constellations, with anything, you stay rooted in success? How do you ensure as a manifester you're rooted in peace? As a reflector, you're rooted in surprise. It really is about how do you ensure that you allow astrology to work for you and supporting you in building a business by design and love and all the aspects of your life that really contribute to you living your design. So Santos, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So let's start by looking at this question, right? What does it really mean? What should I be aware of when it comes to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction? Well, to really answer this, we have to break it down, because it's actually a pretty deep and complex question, because what the heck even is a conjunction, right? Mm-hmm. And for that, I'll bring up my screen here.
Which, by the way, if you're listening to this has a video component. That way you can follow along and you can see what we're referencing and how to interpret this and understand it and follow along with us. One of the things that I like to do, I'm an investigator, Santos ex-NASA scientist, role modeling how he goes about answering such questions. We like to not just tell you, because again, human design really is about how do you become your own authority. That way you don't have to rely on what someone else tells you. You can understand it for yourself. And so everything we strive to do is to teach you and to show you how to understand this. That way you can apply it to a larger lens planets and be able to navigate it on your own. You can become really empowered in figuring out, okay, how do I answer these questions for myself moving forward?
So conjunction from the astronomy perspective, based on the Encyclopedia Britannica, a conjunction is the meeting or the passing, right, of two celestial bodies. So the easiest...
Two or more celestial bodies.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The easiest, kind of most common conjunction in astronomy is really the moon, right? When the moon comes between the sun and the earth, we call that a conjunction, and that is basically the new moon, right?
Could the full moon also be a conjunction then too? It would just be on the other side.
Yeah, so superior conjunction.
It's the sun and the moon and the earth in conjunction.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. So
every month we experience conjunctions from a lunar perspective with the full moon and the new moon.
Exactly. This graphic here actually shows Venus in conjunction, right? And so you can see at the center we have the sun, and then outside of that we have the orbit of Venus, and then we have the orbit of the Earth kind of as that final ring, right? So you can see that when the planet Venus comes between in the Earth and the Sun, that's what astronomers call an inferior conjunction. And then when the planet goes kind of outside the Sun, meaning the Sun is between the Earth and Venus, you actually have, when it's outside, when the Sun is between. Did I say that correctly? You can see it here in the graphic, right? Mm-hmm. Venus, the sun, and then the earth. That's a superior conjunction. You can see the major difference here is going to be obviously the placement, but also the visibility, right? Because in this position here in superior conjunction, the sunlight is beaming and hitting the planet and bouncing back to Earth, so you can actually see it. And in an inferior conjunction, the sunlight is actually beaming off of the planet and away from the Earth, and there is no sunlight to actually shine the side of the planet that's facing Earth, so we can't actually see anything. That's why the new moon is, pretty much dark, right? So this is,
you can't see the reflection, and then you can also see the phases of the moon as it continues to orbit, right?
Exactly.
It's like how it goes crescent, half, and so it's the same thing with the other planets, like you see here in this image with Venus.
Yeah. So this is the astronomer's definition, right, of what a conjunction is. Yeah. When it comes to the
astrological,
the astrological definition of what a conjunction is, according to Mind Body Green, right, a conjunction is when planets are very close together. Unlike in the astronomer's definition, when it's like exactly aligned, the astrologer definition is more of they're in the same area of the sky, right? Some people will refer to a conjunction when they're in the same sign, like both in Virgo, for example, right? And that's the astrologer. So the main difference here is, it looks like astrology is a little bit more loosely defined, right? It's in the same area, the same sign, not necessarily in the exact same
line of path
degree, right, in the sky.
Although from an astrological lens, it can mean that the conjunction really happens when they're in the exact same degree.
It can,
although there is a deeper interpretation that tends to happen based upon what sign they're in and the energy of the planets and what that means when they come together, how they merge, how they amplify, how they interplay and interact with each other, whether it's deemed to be something favorable or unfavorable. There's more interpretation that tends to happen from an astrological lens.
Right. So I prefer the astronomy definition, right, where you can see them perfectly aligned.
Scientific.
Because I'm scientific. But just be aware that when an astrologer is saying there's a conjunction happening, it could mean in the same sign, right? In Virgo, for example. So one other visual that might be kind of useful to look at here is this one here. From the sky itself, right? Just kind of cool to look at, where you can see the conjunction happening right there. Boom. They almost become one dot when they align perfectly. This was from, it was Jupiter-Saturn, in 2020.
Conjunction. Mm-hmm.
Jupiter-Saturn. So I'll play that one more time so you can see it. I think it kind of just brings home the visual of what a conjunction actually looks like. Bam, right there. And then it passes, right? So that's the definition of like conjunction, right? Now let's go and define what does this planet represent, right? What do the planets themselves represent? And this is directly from the definitive book of human design by Ra Uru. You can see here the definitions of the different planets. And in this case, we're going to be looking at Jupiter
and Uranus.
So Ideal, can you read through the Jupiter?
Sure. So Jupiter really represents law and protection. And it says, other than the sun, no object exerts greater influence over us. Jupiter is the logos for the universe and defines our outer development in 11 plus year cycles, as well as our relationship to the other and the whole. We are each imprinted with a very focused theme of what is correct for us, our law as written by Jupiter. If you live by that law, you can gain great good fortune, as Jupiter is very generous at times, but your ability to benefit from the generosity comes from deep obedience to your own law. Mm-hmm. Now for Uranus actually maps to unusualness, chaos, and order. Where Uranus shows up in your design is where you express your unusualness. The evolutionary mutative undercurrent of Uranus allowed us to transform our understanding of the Maya and extend our lifespan to the current 84 years. Uranus also introduced us to the tripartite life process of subjective youth, objective midlife, and transcendent older age. So this is the definition of Jupiter and Uranus and how the planets interplay from a human design perspective.
So how do you interpret this, excerpt from the book?
Well, I would say Jupiter, and also knowing some of the things from how Jupiter tends to be described from an astrology perspective as the great beneficent, and talking about it being very generous at times. There's a lot of goodness that can come from Jupiter. Is that the one that's like the sweetest honey? Like the sweetness of honey, if it comes from Jupiter.
That's why Ra called it Jovian. I called this company Jovian Archive, because of the sweetness of Jupiter, life or something like that. Yeah.
And at the same time, one of our teacher, Barbara, talked about how, and I think Ra may have said this, that human design is a Uranian force.
Yeah.
Right? So it has this energy of Jupiter and Uranus in it, and that Uranus is really about it being a powerful, transformative, disruptive, revolutionary force in people's lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, chaotic. That Jupiter really is about laws and a certain way of being in the world, and has a great impact on you. Like when you think about laws, I think about something that's quite fixed in your life, and versus Uranus, which is about
you also
the opposite,
think about
right?
Justice, right? In the concept of law, there is such a thing as justice, right? If you break the law, you get punished, and if you honor the law, you are protected. So there is this like pretty, I would say, strong and very sense of like justice and law when it comes to Jupiter. That's the vibe I get from Jupiter. And this is really interpretation, right? People kind of trying to like sense what these planets really mean,
the energy of
them, right?
And how they impact us and imprint us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus now, when you think about a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, you combine law and order with law and protection with chaos, right? And revolution and evolution. You can sense that there will be some level of dissonance amongst the two, potentially, given that Uranus is more about being evolutionary and mutative, versus Jupiter's about serving and protecting the law.
Yeah, they seem to be quite different,
almost in opposition.
Almost. 'Cause there is that like duality of chaos and order that Uranus brings.
Yeah.
Or at least based on Ra's interpretation here. So you wouldn't expect them to necessarily hang out. Like if I think about the people that I knew in, I don't know, like high school or college that were unusual, chaotic, they were very different from the people that I embodied law and protection and this feeling of like justice. So anyways, that Jupiter and Uranus being conjunct basically means they're going to be aligned, right? They're going to be in the same kind of location in the sky. And from a human design perspective, like what that looks like.
Well, before we go to that, there's one thing that I do want to seed here.
Okay.
When you scroll down further, and if you have this book, you can find it on page 38 and 39. What's interesting is that when you talk about transits and how they imprint you, they're constantly, your body is constantly being impacted through your openness by transits, by other people. And so this is an example in the book. Can you scroll up a little bit more, please, on this page, where it shows that where you are defined, that is the way that human design describes it, is that this is where you're a student and the undefined centers are where you go to school, meaning the places where you're defined in your design stay consistent within you. You know this, you understand this is who you are. But the places where you lack definition, yes, they're the places where you're open to the greatest amount of conditioning in this lifetime, but they're also the places where you're open to the greatest amount of learning. This is where all of the wisdom comes from, when you're able to transcend all of the not-self themes and integrate them into lessons learned. And when you scroll down on this page, you will see that, yes, there's an example of a woman named Joan who has an encounter with the daily transit. And what I want you to pay attention to, because this is relevant throughout this, is that by staying true to her strategy and authority, she can stay grounded in her own design and avoid being distracted from her course or by the people around her who have also been affected by the transit. So that's something I wanted to interject here before we move on to Maya mechanics.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. I really like this word that Ra uses to describe the transits, as he uses the word encounter. And if you think about the last time you encountered something or someone, that was like you met someone on the street. You encountered someone. You met up. You saw them. You encountered a friend. You encountered a stranger. You encountered someone or something. You encountered a deer walking by, right? Mm-hmm. And
even Ra, with the encounter that he had with the voice, where he channeled.
He also called
the system.
the experience he had where he first channeled human design as an encounter. He described it as the encounter for his life, right? And I like the word encounter because it kind of puts it into context. Like what is happening with a transit is we're encountering a stranger, we're encountering a friend, we're encountering an animal, we're encountering a new experience. We're encountering an information field.
The potential for wisdom.
We're encountering someone that is happening in our environment. We're encountering weather, right? We're encountering something. And what is that something can be, deciphered by looking at the human design charts, the transits and all that, right? But at the end of the day, it's just an encounter.
It's not who you are.
It passes. That person that you encountered walks on by. That animal that you encountered walks on or scurries off, right? That weather that you encountered passes. So this is something that will teach us, and it would affect us some more than others, because as Edie mentioned,
depending on your definition,
if you have definition, right? If you already have something colored in, you already have something happening in that space, then it's like if somebody who has never encountered a horse before, like, I guess, what's a better example? Maybe what was an animal that came from Europe that the Native Americans had never seen?
No idea.
Something like man, there was some
Christophorus. They probably never, or whatever his name was, actually.
Anyways,
they had never encountered
my metaphor.
The conquistadors.
Sure, they had never encountered those people. Like, yeah, my metaphor is falling flat right now. I'm just gonna move on from this. My point is that if there's no definition, in your chart, you're going to have a much deeper encounter. If you've never before seen a horse and you see a horse for the first time, you're going to be like, what is that? Versus if you live amongst horses, you live on a ranch, you grew up on a ranch, and you see a horse, you're going to be like, hey, that's a horse, right? I live amongst them.
Okay, a great example could be Luna, and the first time she saw cows on the ranch.
Oh, yeah.
And she was barking at it. Like, what in the world is this humongous
our dog
beast, right?
is named Luna.
Yes.
And the first time she saw a cow, she had no idea what it was. She barked at it. She was scared of it. She didn't know what it was. Of course, the cow paid it no attention. It just kept grazing and chomping on its grass as it does. Yeah. And she was absolutely flabbergasted. What is this cow, right? And for us, it was just a cow, you know? And so encounters will be different for different people. It's not always going to be significant. It's even if it's a conjunction that hasn't happened in however long, like it doesn't actually matter. What matters is a definition that's inside of you. Yeah. So we'll dig into some examples here for this specific conjunction here in a moment, but just wanted to kind of clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's dive in. So I'm pulling up Maya Mechanics right now, which is like the official chart pulling tool. This is
software
straight from Jovian Archive, right? So this is the like the industry standard, the most accurate, if you will, straight from the company of the guy who founded this from Ra, right? So you can see here that when we looked through the transits, basically what you're looking at here is a specific date, right? What is active on that date? And we looked at several different dates.
What's the weather?
The astrology community didn't seem to agree on exactly what day this conjunction was happening. And so we scanned through the different dates and times, and we found that on April 18th, the beginning of the day, 12:30 a.m., you can see here.
It lasted through the morning.
Yeah, you can see here
that Jupiter and Uranus,
both Jupiter and Uranus are exactly in the same gate, 23.3 and 23.3.
They're conjunct based upon the astronomical definition.
They are
being in the
directly
exact alignment.
Conjunct based on the scientific astronomy based definition of what conjunction means. Now, of course, because
did I say astronomical? Is that correct in that sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because astronomical also means something else, but yeah.
You can see here that gate 23 is going to be in Taurus, right? So from an astrology perspective, they're both in the same zodiac sign. And so, yes, they are conjunct within that definition as well. But they are directly conjunct from the astronomy-based definition, astronomical definition.
Astronomy definition, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So 23.3, right? Just before we dive into what this gate actually means and the explanation of it, in case you're wondering, it is still active today. 23.
At the time of us recording
this. At the time of us recording this, 23. And it will remain in conjunction up until May 27th.
27th.
Yeah, until May 27th. Yeah.
No, 27th is when it moves. So
right,
on the
so
27th.
26th to the 26th. Yeah. On the 27th, it ends.
Yeah, so they'll no longer be in gate 20, and they'll both no longer be in Taurus because Jupiter moves into Gemini in gate 20 on the 27th.
So you can see Jupiter moves into gate 20th on May 20th. Sorry, to gate 20th on May 27th, and the gate 20 is in Gemini. So now it is no longer in Taurus. It is no longer conjunct by the astronomy or the astrology definition at all. So that's when it technically ends, according to Maya Mechanics software and human design.
The human design transits.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's dive into then what actually is going on with gate 23 and what the meaning of that is. So let's take a look.
So this is a gate coming out of the throat center. It's gate 23. It's half of the channel of genius to freak. And it's about splitting apart, the gate of assimilation, amorality, the awareness and understanding that leads to acceptance of diversity. Now, when they were conjunct in April 18th, 2024, they were both in the third line. Now, third line always carries with it the theme of the martyr, of mutation, of evolution. And in here, this is an individual gate as well, because it's an individual circuitry. It's the third line of individuality, meaning independent expression, because it's coming from the throat, that is not by its nature detrimental to others. Now, in exaltation, this is vitality and personal power that can engender jealousy but not threat. So individual expression which attracts attention but not threat. And in detriment, an individual mysteriousness that attracts active suspicion and threat. The freak, individual expression that attracts suspicion and threat. So then what does this mean from a practical lens? Well, it means that if gate 23.3, this was active for all of us, right? This is what this transit means. In Jupiter and in Uranus, it was active. This theme was active for all of us in the throat center. If you have a defined throat, you may have experienced, if you're being impacted heavily by the transits, the encounter, and you're identifying with it and thinking that it's you, you may have found that you were experiencing these kinds of themes on that day around that time. Do you want to add anything to this, Santos?
Yeah, I want to zoom out for a sec, because one thing that's really important when it comes to these gate activations is for us to localize them in the body. So gate 23 is actually, you mentioned it, right? But I just want to show it visually. Gate 23 comes out of the throat, right? It's right here, goes up towards the ajna. And so what this means is that for those that might not have a defined throat, or might have a defined throat but not have this gate, for those that don't have this gate, it's going to have the biggest impact.
Yes.
Right. And those that already have this gate, it's called renewal. You know, there's going to be some information that's coming in from the planet, but it's more subtle, the effect that you might be feeling here. So if you already have this defined in your chart, this conjunction might not be affecting you much at all. Like, it's going to be more subtle than those that don't have this defined. And for our 6-2 Manjin who asked the question today, it's actually quite impactful. So we'll show her example here in a moment.
Although it is still impactful, like you said, when you don't have it there, right? Whether you have a hanging gate that wants to connect to it, like if you have the hanging 43, or if you have an undefined throat, or you're wide open in your throat, then what will happen, especially through the not self, is that you may experience extra pressure to speak up from the place of those themes, where if you click on 23.3 again, either in Jupiter or in Uranus, where you may have felt the extra pressure to express this individuality, to speak up from a place of personal power.
Difficult to hide when you're feeling that pressure. And if you do hide, the law might just punish you. Your own internal law might have a punishment for you, right? You might get into the not self themes of frustration or anger, or
may create chaos.
Bitterness, because you are being pressured by literally our planets in the neutrino
Multiple
stream
planets.
to be your individual self, to split apart from the pack. And what does not self conditioning tell us our whole lives? The tall poppy gets cut down, right? Like, don't stand out.
Be all the same.
Be the same.
Look the same. Speak the same. Think the same. Talk the same.
This is a big conditioning force in our lives that this not self conditioning force stops us from showing up as our individual selves and for fear of being judged. But right now, during this conjunction, since April 18th and up until the 26th, there's this pressure in the throat to split apart, right? To express your individuality,
it moves from line 3.
That's true. It does move from the lines.
But yeah, the splitting apart,
it was more about the individuality on the 18th, but it's going to be moving through all 6 lines as the transit continues.
But this awareness and understanding that leads to acceptance of diversity, the theme of the 23rd gate will be active through that time.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else?
No.
Okay. So then let's look at revisit the question.
Now, go back to that transit image. Now, what's interesting here is that, again, it depends on your design what would be most impactful, because here you have this hanging gate 23. And depending upon your definition, this may or may not be as impactful to you as the fact that there was a defined head in Ajna, the 63-4, and this collective transit of the individual knowing, not individual knowing, collective knowing, and trying to look at the future to predict things, right? May have felt if you have an undefined head in Ajna, your head was more busy and active than usual, or even the defined heart center transit, which would have been most impactful.
I've been feeling this one way
and that
more
one has
than
been
the 23rd.
Exactly.
I've been feeling this hard
because the 2551 is all about shock. Right? And so you'll be experiencing that, especially if you have an undefined heart center, or if you don't have the shock. Like there may be things that come up for you in your life that are shocking, and you may attribute it to what someone else's interpretation of what it means for things to be conjunct. That's what created it, when really what human design shows us is that this is really active in the design.
Yeah.
But again, this is the beauty of human design, because it's so much more specific.
Yeah.
It's so much more rooted in the
and
individual.
Personal of what
it's
you're
personal.
what's going to be affecting you.
Yes.
This is actually a really big point, because when it comes to what is affecting us, the centers and the channels have a much bigger impact usually than a specific gate, unless that specific gate is super important to our design,
to your specific design.
Your specific design. So a transit or a conjunction or a retrograde, right? It's actually, we don't really know if it's really going to do anything for us unless you can actually look at your chart and look, what are the gates that are being active? What are the channels that are being active? What are the centers that are being active? And does that impact my design heavily or not, right? Because it might not actually have an impact on you as much as something else that's active that day, like the head, the ajna, or the heart and the G center.
And that's just one piece of the transits, because when you look at the sun sign, right, where it's in gate 3.3, the sun is the overarching background frequency for the entire planet for that day.
Yeah, and so it is way closer than Uranus or Jupiter. Jupiter is said to be the second most impactful planet,
but not more impactful than the sun
or the earth. But
right.
That's
so even then, and then if you're at 3.3 and you're going out and you're
70% from the sun and the earth, as compared to everything else.
Everything else makes up the rest of that 30%. Right. So there's so many more keys and nuances to the transits than just, oh, this planet is conjunct here, or oh, this planet is in retrograde, or oh, this planet is square, this
and significantly
sextile.
More impactful just by pure proximity, like from the sun, for example.
Yes, how far away it is.
By how it individually affects me based on my design.
Yeah.
Meaning maybe the gate 23 doesn't impact me as much as gate 3, or even 41 or something based on my design. So let's look at a specific example here.
Yes, the person who asked this question.
Yes, our 6-2-man Jen.
Yes. So this is their natal chart.
Yeah.
This is the chart that they were born with. As you can see, undefined root, undefined head and ajna, which is why we have this undefined head question. Yes. And an undefined solar plexus. So these are the natural themes that will play out in their design. The other centers are defined: the spleen, the sacral, the heart, the G center, and the throat. But as you'll notice when we go over to the transit, is there anything you want to speak to on this natal chart?
Yes, I do want to point out that, we already looked at the gate activation in this conjunction, and that is gate 23. So if you look at that right here, you can see that she is missing gate 23, right? She does have a defined throat. So there isn't a big lighting up happening here,
or immense pressure on the throat.
Immense pressure on the throat. It's a little bit of extra pressure on the throat, but in terms of energy, if you look at these centers as rooms and electricity flowing through these channels and the lights turning on, the throat is already turned on. Okay, so there's no activation happening here in the greater center, but there is an activation that's going to be happening in the gate. And just look at this 43 hanging here, wanting to be connected, waiting for that 23 to turn on. So as soon as this 23 turns on, it's going to light up the entire ajna. So
and even looking at this chart, you'll notice that there will be a tendency to have the certainty, the logic, or the understanding through the undefined head and the undefined ajna, having these multiple hanging gates, 2 out of 3 of the hanging gates missing. There may be this tendency, this not self tendency of searching for certainty, searching for logic, searching for inspiration, searching for answers, wondering about things that have, and holding on to ideas and questions that don't matter, that aren't important. That is going to be a central theme, a central not self theme for this design.
Or just feeling a lot of pressure to create certainty, right?
Tremendous pressure.
The defined ajna, when you normally have an undefined ajna, what happens when that energy flows, when those lights turn on in the ajna center, is all of a sudden there's all this pressure to be certain, to like think about things logically. There's an ability to do so. So in a true self state, that'll turn into certainty, logic, strategy. Right. In a not self orientation, it'll turn into pressure, increased pressure on like, oh God, I've got to like figure this out, be certain about it, have the logic right, have the strategy right. Like
getting caught up in your head,
you'll get caught
up
your body in that mental pressure. And that's something to look out for, right? Because at the end of the day, like Idia mentioned back in the beginning, when you look at the transits, even in as Ra explained them in the Definitive Guide to Human Design, by staying true to strategy and authority, you stay grounded in your own design and you avoid being distracted by any encounter, including a transit, including a conjunction,
or the people around you, the people around you who have been swayed by the transits.
Exactly.
Right? The not self can't get a grip on you when you're being your true self.
Exactly.
When you're trusting in your strategy and authority. It can't knock you off the course of what's correct for you. It can't knock you away from having the satisfaction and the peace and the success and the surprise that's your birthright in your business and in your life.
So this is actually a huge point, because when it comes to really practicing human design in your day-to-day life, really living in it, right? What we do is we practice in staying aligned as our true selves, because when transits like this hit, whether they're a daily transit or a conjunction like this that, you know, hasn't happened in however many years, what happens is when you're in alignment as your true self and an encounter happens, right? You meet a person, you get different weather. What happens is it's almost like you encounter a power-up, right? In a video game. Like you get the power-up, like Mario gets the mushroom and he becomes bigger, or the little fire flower, and all of a sudden he has extra powers. Like you get power-ups when you're in the true self alignment, regardless of whatever specific theme or how we read the gate, or who interprets it, or what book you read, or what astrologer you follow. Like regardless of the interpretation, if you're in a true self alignment, that transit, that conjunction, that retrograde, that encounter becomes a power up for you. There's a benefit to it. There's a support to it, right?
Now, go ahead.
In this case, the power up for our 6-2 Manjin would be that for you, your power up.
Click on it.
What?
Click on the transit chart.
Well, hold on. Okay. Your power up would be having certainty, having strategy, having logic, having this ability to communicate concepts and ideas where maybe before you struggled communicating that. And this time you'll be able to really structure your thoughts and communicate them as well, because you'll have that connection to the throat, from the ajna to the throat. So you're going to get all this new energy in your ajna center that will allow you to think strategically, structure logical concepts, and communicate, right? And be able to communicate these effectively as well. And that's in your true self. If you just focus on staying true self and following and trusting your strategy and authority, you will just get that power up, even if you didn't know that you were getting that power up, right? If you are in a not self orientation when this transit is active, what'll happen is instead of it being a power up, it'll be essentially an amplification of not self themes, right? You'll end up in frustration. You'll end up in mental pressure and anxiety. You'll feel the pressure to be certain, to have the strategy down
to be
right.
Certain,
you might
to hold on to this false sense of certainty out of fear of looking stupid or not having the correct answer.
You'll feel pressure to rush to the answers or the solutions. You'll really feel like, come on. I gotta figure this out right now. Like it'll amplify the not self themes of your design.
As well well as you may find that you end up ignoring your body's wisdom and trying to solve it from your head. That instead of trusting in your gut and your intuition, which happens instantly and knows what's correct for you, there's a tendency to live in your head. Because remember, the head and the ajna, the mind, is not for your internal authority. It's not designed to run your life. For any type, for any authority, it's not for you. It's a great external authority. It works wonderfully for others. But for yourself, you can never, ever, 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 ever live or guide your life, your business, or anything based upon what your mind says, or what your mind tells you, or what's flowing through your head or your ajna. It just doesn't work. And so that can be a tendency of the not self theme when incorrect. And so, Santos, I love too that you said about how when your true self will really support you, and when you're not self, it will support you too. It's just, it's like, how much does getting beat in the face with a 2x4 support you? You get bruised, you get beaten, you got to recover from it. But I mean, the next time you're not going to be walking down that dark alley making those same mistakes,
sure.
right?
Yeah, sure. Self-corrections are supportive at the end, but they're very unpleasant, You heal from an injury and you get lessons in wisdom, but if you could...
Laced with bitterness and frustration
and
anger
could go
and
through
disappointment.
that more gracefully, right, without having to get the injury or the not self-correction, then why wouldn't you, right? And that comes down to the practice of maintaining true self states, right?
Which
shifting
only comes
out of not self into true self by trusting your strategy and authority. Exactly. So we can show the specific transit on April 18th. That was when the conjunction actually started. For you, it would have activated your every single energy center. So you would have had so much energy that day, tons of pressure everywhere, just like fully lit up, so much energy, right? And again, in a true self state, bam, you're
knocking out so many things.
You're literally Super Saiyan.
Everything's flowing.
Totally activated.
All in the right timing. The 4323, genius to freak. Now, again, that's going to be unconscious within you because you have the unconscious 43. However, naturally, you would have had structure. Things would have fallen in line easily. Would have had logic. Would have been able to communicate that with a futuristic sight, an individual knowing. Would have had an emotional time. Right? 2 waves active, the crash wave and the spike wave. So it would have been a great time to be social, to connect with others, to have a desire to do things with others, only if you feel like it. But it also could have led to a certain amount of melancholy because there's extra individual circuitry here than there normally is in your design. And so it may have been a time where you felt perhaps even more artistic, but even prone to different emotions, a much more emotional time than it normally is for you.
And in a not self orientation, this would have been the equivalent of getting a power surge and blowing a fuse. Just so much energy everywhere. And it becomes crippling to the point where you just absolutely cannot function. There's so much pressure. Because
think about it. You put all that, like if you have a ton of energy and you pour it towards the correct thing, it's magic. You're able to get done what would take 10 people to get done in an hour. And at the same time, that same amount of energy poured in a not self direction, I mean, the amount of havoc it can wreak.
It can lead to injury, mental, physical, spiritual. It can lead to...
Ask us how we know.
Absolutely. it can really lead to, some pretty severe and crippling corrections, right? So this is a very, very intense time for you. This specifically on this day, when the conjunction began, it would have turned on like really your entire self. It fully activates every single center. So trust your strategy and authority. Really.
Well, now here's why this is so important. Can you actually pull up a transit chart for just now for this same design? So new transit chart for the same design for this person. It's right there. Great chart. Now, if you notice, a similar design is active right now. The 6124 is active. The 4323 is active for this specific chart, right? The 3041 is active. All of the centers are defined. The 2750 is active, right? All of these channels are activated based upon the current transit today. And this is part of why we say, listen, what we've understood, right? That strategy and authority is everything. Because when you look at astrology and you know that this planet is doing this thing with that planet in the sky, it's like, great, what do you do about it? It's almost like you have no control over that. Or, for example, someone says it's Mercury retrograde. Now, it's Mercury retrograde. What does that mean? Oh, well, someone tells you because someone else told them through someone else that, hey, this means communication, technology, things might be a little bit off. So you take that homogenized, you take that one-size-fits-all definition, explanation of what's going on, and you have an undefined throat. And you're reaching out to all these different people from a not-self theme of trying to get attention, trying to attract people to you, fear of missing out, trying to speak up, the pressure to speak and draw attention to yourself. And lo and behold, you meet resistance on the material plane, because the not-self always meets resistance on the material plane. Well, astrology says, the not-self tells you, the homogenized definition of astrology, right? The not-self tells you, because it's always looking for blame, it says, oh, it's not my fault. It's Zoom's fault. It's Telegram's fault. It's WhatsApp's fault. It's Mercury retrograde's fault. When is it? Or is it the fact that you have an undefined throat center and you haven't been listening to your strategy and authority, and you've been playing out the not-self theme of trying to draw attention to yourself, and you're meeting resistance on that plane, right? So that's just on a basic level. But then let's say, okay, it's correct, and you look at the design and you look at your chart and you say, I'm going to look at the transits for human design, and I'm going to monitor the transits every single day to see what happens for me, what's coming up for me, what are these themes. Well, now you look at this same chart for this same person who was looking at the transits on that day, right? Back when there was the conjunction between Uranus and Jupiter. Well, on that day, they had a very specific thing, but now it's completely changed. Even now, the interpretation of what we gave in the Uranus and Jupiter conjunction is totally different, because the date has passed, because the planets are always moving, because the transits are always happening. And so now what do you do? Well, now you look at today and you look at the just now transit and you see, oh, this other gate's here, and so I got to be mindful of that. Well, it's so much for your mind to try to comprehend, to try to keep up with. And what do you do when the moon is in a placement at the beginning of the day, but by the end of the day, it's completely changed? It's too much for the mind to try to keep up with and comprehend. And if you're sitting here and you're becoming a full-time transit reader, then you're missing out on the beauty of what it is to live your life. Now, if it brings you satisfaction to do those things, if it brings you satisfaction to watch the transits and to read them and to understand them and to combine it with astrology and to get astrological readings and to do all of that, by all means, if it's in alignment with your strategy and authority, do it. Do it to your heart's will. You don't have to stop any of those things. More so that at the end of the day, what changes things for you, what protects you, what guides you, what heals you, what supports you, what guarantees your success in business, in love, in health, in wealth, in every area of your life, is for you to trust your strategy and authority. Mercury's in retrograde, trust your strategy and authority. Uranus is conjunct with Jupiter, trust your strategy and authority. It always comes back to trusting your strategy and authority, because it's the simplest thing that can always guide you back home to what's correct for you. And I know this so deeply because when I first got into human design, my teacher, Barbara, is a brilliant astrologer, astrology savant, and she did this before she found human design. And something would happen and I would say, Barbara, what do I need to know about this blue moon that's happening and Jupiter's over here and this thing? Because I'd hear all these other people, right? Homogenized wisdom, one size fits all wisdom, group think that tells me this is the most important thing that's happening in this quarter of the year. For the rest of the year, this has never happened before in the last 100 years. And I would go to Barbara and I'd say, Barbara, what does this mean for me based upon my human design? And especially because I have this planet in my design. And she would be like, well, it only really matters if your planet and your natal chart was within 1 degree of this placement. And even then, at the end of the day, it all comes back to strategy and authority. And I think, okay, well, I guess she doesn't really want to talk about astrology. But that's before I was wise enough to know that, because at the end of the day, no matter what, the thing that I can do about it, any of it, the thing that guarantees that all of those planetary movements, knowing that the universe is always working in your favor, the universe wants you to win, it's conspiring for you to win. And the way that you stop yourself from blocking your blessings, the way that is that to overcome the not self-conditioning that keeps you from receiving the abundance and the great beneficence of Jupiter. It's what blocks you from receiving all the lessons, all the wisdom, all the money, all the clients, all the things that are correct for you and that are meant for you and that are trying to find their way to you every single moment of every single day. The only way to open up to be able to receive that on a consistent basis is through following and trusting your strategy and authority. And the best part about this is that it's an experiment. You do not have to believe me. You do not have to believe Santos. You could listen to this whole thing. You could watch it. You could say, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Well, I don't know about that. Well, they're not really astrologers, so I'm not really going to listen to them. Well, did they really answer the question? Well, I wanted something different. You could feel 1,000,001 things and know that that's welcome. That's beautiful. Do it, feel it, think it, feel all the things, think all the things, and then test it for yourself. You get to be a scientist. Now that conjunction has moved. Technically, in them still being in Taurus and still being in the same gate until the 26th, it's still active right now. What's changed for you in your life? Do you feel more satisfied as a manifesting generator or a pure generator? Because that's all that matters. Do you feel more successful and recognized as a projector? Because that's your guiding compass. Do you feel more peace as a manifester? Because that's your North Star. Do you feel more surprise and delight as a reflector? Because that's the one thing that matters most in your entire life and your business and any area of your life. That's the real key here. And that's why it always comes back to strategy and authority. And I know, trust me, I've got defined head centers. I have I'm quad left, which means I'm very strategic, I'm very focused, and I'm a heretic. I'm a doubting doubter. I will investigate 1,000,000 things. My mind still doubts human design every day. There's a reason why I read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of charts before we ever even did this work. And yet, the more that you experiment with it and you just say, let me try it out. Let me test it. Let me see. You may find that, when I follow my strategy and authority, it all works out for me. The transits feel smooth. They feel amazing. They feel wonderful. Ask me how I know. I'm navigating my own not self-corrections right now. It's taken me some time to externalize again because of all the not self-corrections that I've been moving through with all of these lovely transits, mutating me and teaching me so much, so much about my life. Santos is chuckling because he knows it full well. He's got a front row seat to the emotional roller coaster that is my life and these not self-corrections, and that he's navigating on his own too. To live your design doesn't mean that it's always going to be butterflies and rainbows and perfect and amazing. No, we've been conditioned from the moment we came into this world. Before you even took your first breath, the conditioning started. And yet, there is a way out, and it's through your strategy and authority. And that's what guides you. That's what protects you. That's what supports you, no matter what's going on outside of you. Because remember, an encounter, be it through the transits or another human being or an individual or whatever, is simply an encounter. It's not you. Don't confuse it with the truth of who it is that you are, because the truth of who you are is here to feel successful and satisfied and recognized and at peace and surprised and delighted. The truth of who you are is here to be the fullest expression of who you were born to be. And that only happens through you being your true self. And the only way you can be your true self is by following your strategy and authority. Santos, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I had a very impactful experience in getting into human design because once you finally convinced me to check it out, learn more about it, because, you know, I have an undefined head, so I am open to many new ideas. Yeah. But I was conditioned as a scientist. You know, I grew up amongst astrophysicists, astronomers, and everything was about the scientific process. And
was groomed in the scientific way too. Maybe that's part of the dilemma.
I mean,
for
I
me.
was pretty hesitant to go from an astronomer who actually observed stars from telescopes. Like, I actually did that.
Yeah.
I participated in scientific papers. Like, I'm an astronomer, a scientist, not an astrologer, right?
Yeah.
And here comes Idia going, hey, you should look at this human design, basically astrology thing. And mind
you, after I deeply investigated it, hundreds and hundreds of charts, I would come to him and I would tell him human design stuff, and he'd be like, "Oh, don't talk to me about that. Why do you have to talk to me about this stuff?"
I was so hesitant. And one of the first things I did was I got the definitive guide to human design. Right, makes sense. Get the book by the guy who channeled the system, made the system, founded the system, whatever, and read it. And what I found on page 20, literally page 8,
the beginning, the introduction.
let me show it here. There it is. On page 8, the introduction, it says, human design does not ask you to believe anything. And I go, check, that's great. It invites you to participate in a potentially life-transforming living experiment. Check, that sounds great, an experiment. I'm a scientist, yes, I like that. And provides you with the practical tools and information needed to live as yourself. Okay, practical tools, living as myself, sounds great. Without this individualizing living experiment, human design is just a complex system of fascinating information to entertain the mind.
Yeah.
And I thought, wait a minute. Does this mean that if I'm not actually like running tests about my human design, that learning human design is just information to entertain the mind?
Yeah. Science fiction.
And I was like, Idia, what does this mean? I brought it up. I was like, wait, why? Does this mean that learning human design doesn't really matter if I'm not actually experimenting? It's like, yeah, that's what it says on page 8. Which, by the way, at the time, she hadn't read that yet, which I found fascinating. I was like, how have you not read page 8?
Because I'm an investigator with purpose. Because
she would rabbit hole specifically on different things. But my point is that when it comes to learning about transits, learning about the gates, learning about the centers, learning about all these aspects of your design, treat them as entertainment for the mind, and make sure that when you learn something new and you actually form an experiment around it, that's when it becomes real living, wisdom, something that can really transform your life. And outside of that, that's entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with entertainment. I have found some of the most entertaining hours and hours and hours of my life learning about my design, learning about, aspects of astrology and planets and how they move. And I find that so entertaining and so enjoyable to indulge in. Yeah.
And in some ways too, I found personally, and you may have found this as well, that the more that I learn about the different facets of design, and I find it to be true, I see evidence of it in my reality, whether it's, hey, this is your diet, and if you eat this diet, then you will feel better. If you spend time in this environment, you will feel better. And I do that, and I test it, and I see, I feel better. That learning helps to bypass the critical wedge that I have, right? Helps to bypass this not self-conditioning that the mind holds on to, and to notice, whoa, I do see that. I do hear that. It helps to shift your consciousness, to open your consciousness and expand it to receive the wisdom. But the only thing that actually changes it is when you go and test it, like Santo said, right? Yeah. Like you just said, when you experiment with it. Mm-hmm. Because to know and not to do is not to know, right? Exactly. That's the reason why that's a common proverb.
Yep.
So if you read, you can read all the things. And this is something that you see more and more. As many, 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 many more people are learning human design and to the degree that they can, right? From whichever teacher that they learn it from, they're learning about a generator and a projector and a reflector, and they're learning whatever interpretation of what they believe that to mean. There's a difference between reading about it or speaking about it and living it.
Yeah.
They're not the same.
Yeah. And just for context, like transit experiments, one of the teachers that I've been learning from in terms of the transits said to me that I can only really experiment with transits once I can really like master and sense my strategy and authority as well as my profile lines.
Yeah.
So I have to like, there are degrees of subtlety in human design.
Yeah.
And when I first started my experiment, I could not discern between success and bitterness, right?
Yeah.
As a projector, I just didn't, I didn't quite know what bitterness was. I didn't quite know like what success really is, right?
Yeah.
And for generators, I've noticed this as well. They ask like, what is satisfaction really mean, right? And I mean, it's a valid question.
And what does it mean to respond?
What does response mean? What does satisfaction mean? And then,
and even as a generator too, I love that you shared this. I didn't know what a gut response was.
what is a gut response? What does
And
it
then
mean?
when I started to think about a gut response, I think it was a yes. But the more that I listen, it's like, that wasn't really a yes.
What does it mean to trust my emotions? Like, what does it mean to trust my authority, to speak, to trust what I say out loud?
I mean, as an emotional authority, the depth of emotions that I feel now compared to a month ago, let alone a year ago or years ago when we first encountered this system, unparalleled. Unparalleled.
So, and then once you start to get to a point where you say, oh, I can recognize my strategy and my authority. And I know that I'm living in my true self state right now. And I know that I'm living in my not self state, like clear vision around true self states, not self states. Check, right? You're getting in tune with your strategy and authority. The next level of subtlety beyond that starts to become your profile lines, right? Which in the chart are in the sun sign. Again, 70% of the impact of the celestial bodies comes from the sun and the earth, right? Because they're the most proximate, they're closest to us. And the most amount of neutrinos that impact us come from these celestial bodies, the sun and the earth. And so familiarize yourself with the lines. What does that mean? So I'm a role model. 6. Well, what does it mean for me to role model? When am I role modeling? Am I role modeling right now? Am I not role modeling right now? Like, what does that mean, right? Like I must discern for myself when I am role modeling. If I'm making an offer, right, for my business, am I offering something that I've role modeled or am I not? Right? Is my offer in alignment with my lines?
Are you as a fourth line navigating your network?
I'm a fourth line as well.
And beyond that, because it's a projector, are you receiving invitations?
What is an opportunity? Who is my network? Or
is an
Edie is an
invitation?
investigator, right?
Yeah.
Edie, are you investigating? What have you been investigating?
Do I have a solid foundation around
what
it
do you
is
feel
that
like you have a solid
externalizing?
foundation around?
Yeah.
She's a 5, a heretic.
Externalization.
Hey, what have you been doubting recently? What have you been externalizing recently? Oh, you haven't been externalizing? So you haven't been attuned with your 5 line? Oh, you are attuned with your 5 line. Okay, like getting attuned, getting in alignment with your profile lines, with that sun sign that is the most like prominent. It's right there in your face every day. It's so close to us. Can you sense it when you're in alignment with your profile, with those, with essentially the sun right there, right? And then beyond that, then we start to get into more subtlety, right? Then we can start looking at some of the further away planets in our charts, like, Jupiter and Uranus and all the other ones, right? And then we can start looking at the subtlety, the gates and the chops and our variable, right? And those elements develop
Color,
as we build
tone,
more and more trust with our strategy and authority, because then we can say, okay, I tried my diet. I tried eating differently. Do I feel my true self or my not self? You can always navigate the truth of the knowledge that you're learning. You can validate the truth of the source that you're learning it from by recognizing within yourself whether you're experiencing true self benefits from that or not self corrections from it. You can discern it clearly because you took it a step at a time and you experimented with the first things first, right? Like Edie and I when we first encountered human design, hey, you're supposed to sleep outside of each other's auras, and we have double auras, so that's 12 feet apart. Oh my God, do we have to sleep in separate bedrooms? Okay, so we experimented and tried sleeping in different bedrooms. That helped tremendously. We've done it for almost 2-3 years now.
3 years.
3 years, yeah. And our environment is wet kitchens. We literally just yesterday actually, we are experimenting with putting our office right next to our kitchen. So we're actually always in view of the kitchen. Like, what is it like to be in our environment all the time, right? And experimenting with our designing an experiment and testing it for yourself, a personal experiment. That is how you really live this knowledge. And
this is part of why it's so important too, because when you've lived it, right? This is true wisdom, embodied wisdom in your cells, gnosis, not intellectual spouting and, hey, I'm here, I can talk about this. It's in the embodied wisdom that all of the transformation happens, that all of the lessons that you can externalize to your clients, the people that you're here to serve, can happen.
You have a defined head center, so you don't value the intellectual stuff at all. Like, you never.
I do, because I'm an investigator.
Yes,
I like to research.
as it is a practical thing that's needed. Okay, I enjoy fiction sometimes. Like, I enjoy looking at the transits and just seeing. Like, I enjoy diving into some of these concepts just for the sake of enjoying them, but I don't get them confused with truly making like progress in life transforming experiments based on my design. And that's really the message that I want to share.
I understand that. I agree with that. What I was thinking about when I said that was actually about, there was someone that I encountered who said, hey, if you don't feel comfortable sleeping in separate beds from your partner, then something you can try is separate blankets, right? Which is totally false and not true at all. Like, it doesn't work the same. And I thought about how I have a deep understanding and wisdom of that because we have experience. I've experimented with it for 3 years. So something that someone tells me outside of me can't change the wisdom through experience that I have, that I've embodied, right? So that's the power of human design, that when you live your strategy and authority and you live your design and you experience the benefit and the fruit of that, that changes how you interact with the world at large.
I would totally be open to trying different blankets if the blanket was made out of some material that was like,
show me the scientific evidence of an aura shielding blanket.
Aura shield blanket.
And then at that point, it probably doesn't even feel like worth it, right? Because the whole point of being an aura is that it feels good to be together. All the things that you connect up with each other, not to mention the fact that you're asleep anyway.
The Faraday
and
cage
so you
blanket.
don't. Yeah, exactly. So that's more so what I was speaking to, that when you have the wisdom through experience, no one can dupe you. You're not falling prey to what someone else says. You live your own truth. And it doesn't matter what's written somewhere or what someone else says or what can be intellectualized or what someone else spouts or talks about or what you read somewhere, because so much of the information out in our world is so homogenized. And I use that word homogenized because, one, it's part of the human design lexicon, but also because it speaks this idea of like everything's the same. It's groupthink. You think about a book like 1984 where they talked about how there are all these listening devices and everyone says the same thing and everyone thinks the same thing and everyone does the same stuff. You see it everywhere, especially on social media. You see it rampant in so many areas of life where everyone tells you, oh, you've got to have this kind of funnel. And so everyone has this kind of funnel. Oh, you've got to create social media clips this way. And you create a podcast and you have these kind of subtitles. One person comes up with it and it works. And then every single person copies it. It's like a little copycat machine. And instead, you can live the truth of who it is you are. You're here to be an individual. You're here, and not necessarily individual, because human design has individual, collective, etc. But you're here to be unique, and the expression of what you're here to bring forth in this life. You weren't born into this world to be a copycat. You weren't born into this world to be a reductionist copy of some inferior model that's not even you. You're here to know what's true for you and to honor that no matter what. And that in being that, not thinking that, not speaking that, but in being that, embodying that, that is how you live out the magic that you're here to live. That is how you build the business that you're here to build. That is how you impact the lives that you're here to impact. That is how you have the freedom that you're here to feel and to really live out and experience. And it comes through trusting your strategy and authority. It comes through following that above and beyond anything else. And it's incredibly challenging, because we live in an odd self world. And every single moment, in every single way, there are people who are trying to convince you to be someone and something that you're not. They're trying to convince you that blankets are aura shielding when they're not. And you've got to be the one who's wise enough to say, okay, I understand who it is that I am. Okay, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to experiment with this. Oh, it feels so unknown. It feels so different. Oh my gosh, I could die, because your body literally will feel like, your mind will tell you. It will freak out and be like, this is certain death for sure. And you've got to keep calm and carry on and keep coming back to your strategy and authority. And it takes so much surrender, and it takes so much trust. And it's by no means easy. But then again, being not self is not easy either. You know, all the times when, you know, in this not self-correction that I had, when I experienced an asthma flare-up that I haven't experienced in years. I used to live with chronic asthma. I just thought that that was what it was, and that you just got to take pills, and that you got to do, or, you know, when I got to holistic medicine, I just got to use acupuncture and use Chinese medicine and use herbal teas, or I just got to, you know, NLP through every single thought and every single trauma so that my lungs can be free. And now that I have human design, I haven't experienced that in so long. I mean, the contrast to recognize how much my life has changed, because I understand what it is to wait, to respond, and to trust my emotions, and to live my true self. And so if someone tries to tell me, oh, well, the only way that you can be free of your lungs can be open, I don't believe that. I know it's not true. It's like Santos used to sprain his ankles all the time. How many times have you sprained your ankles, babe?
Too many to count.
Too many to count. It's insane. It's crazy to think of. And someone would tell him, oh, well, you know, it's weak ankles. You got to do this thing. You got to do that thing. But it's like, was he invited and recognized to do the things that he was doing that were leading to him spraining his ankle? Was he trying to rush to do stuff because he got an undefined root and an undefined head? Was he trying to prove himself in the movement that he was taking on, and that was leading to all of these challenges? You know? It becomes so clear. And so someone can come to you and they can literally be trying to sell you snake oil. And if it's not aligned with your strategy and authority, you're like, yeah, I'm good. Thanks so much. Nope, I don't think I need that course. I felt into it. It's not a yes for me. Checked in with my spleen. No splenic hit for that. I'm a no. But thank you for the invite. You know, that's the beauty of really living your design. Is there something else you want to add, Santos?
Well, I guess we'll see you in 14 years the next time
Uranus and Jupiter are conjunct. Or really, come back to this audio 14 years from now, because the truth will still be the same. The lessons and the message will still be the same.
That's true.
It might be in a different gate. The theme might be slightly different, but the truth is the truth is the truth is the truth.
Yeah.
It does not change, and that's the beauty of it. As annoying as it can sometimes seem when every answer comes back to strategy and authority, and it's like, but what does that mean? How do I get there? At the same time, there's something that's so relieving in that, because you don't have to now become like a beautiful mind and you're this like savant who keeps all of these numbers and all of these calculations in your head every single day when you wake up and you're like, okay, the sun is here today. This is what I gotta do. Like, can you imagine?
I just recently pulled up the calculations for how to like manually calculate a chart. And I have been looking at that as like a next like investigation that I want to do. But I know it's just intellectual entertainment. And so it's not like super high on my priority list. But I do enjoy, you know, going into some of these topics and exploring them, and just remember the importance of starting with strategy and authority and creating your experiments and really getting attuned to your strategy and authority, and then your profiles, and then dive into your gates,
centers,
the
centers, and then the gates,
your profiles, your centers, channels. Your gates, your channels. Go from there, right?
And the other thing too, I like that you shared that. What you said about seeing the calculations by hand. I think that's a beautiful example that you could sit here and you could calculate your chart by hand. Or you could use Maya mechanics and just pull up your chart, right? Right. And beyond that, rather than pulling up your chart every day, you could just trust your strategy and authority.
Yeah.
As a projector, you could just wait for the invitation.
I mean, it's like kind of like GPS,
loud,
right? We don't have to know how GPS works.
Yeah.
We just trust
Yeah.
that when we put our address in and it navigates us, that we're going to get to where we're going.
It's superior technology is the thing. That you don't have to pull out a map and map everything physically, and then you're like, great, this is how I'm going to get up the street to go to the grocery store. No, you can put it in your GPS and you can drive there. Yeah. And it's going to get you to where you're meant to go in perfect divine timing and order. And it's the same thing with your body. Your body is a vehicle. And when you tune into your strategy and authority, it is the great cosmic GPS of your life. It will always guide you to what's correct for you, and it will always get you to where you're trying to go. Or something even better, because sometimes your mind thinks that you're trying to go somewhere and it's just not correct for you. So yeah, trust your strategy and authority.
Thanks for listening.
Beginning, middle,
Put in
and
the
end.
Comments what you have experienced in this conjunction, what it's been like for you,
what lessons have come through for you,
what you've learned, what the experience has been like for you,
and let's self-corrections.
Let's crowdsource some data, get some information from each other as to what it's been like for us,
Yeah, and may you have the courage to continue to live the truth of who it is that you are and deepen into your experiment.
Yeah.
Bye for now.